Alright. I'm staying. I'm going to keep reading from here. I have a feeling once I fire this old dog up, I'm not going to stop going. I'll get back to the truck and go home. Wimp out. So, what do we got here? Alright. Hi, Steve. My name is Charlie. Just found your channel, which is ironic because I've been to other Bigfoot sites and never had yours come up once. That's because they hate me. Probably the boob tube algorithm playing games. Anyway, love your straight up, no nonsense, non-judgmental attitude about all this. Okay. The story. But just to let you know, I saw nothing. But what I felt was thicker than an oak. I'm a retired cop and former vet that saw combat. I busted in crack houses and chased enemy combatants through the woods. But this gave me a chill that made me stop and say, this isn't worth it today. The story happened in the early 90s in New Jersey. It was early December and the beginning of the shotgun season, which is only 6 days long in that neo-Nazi state. I'm no longer a resident. Can you tell? LOL. Anyway, I was heading out to Alamuchee State Forest in the upper NW section of the state, about 35-40 minutes from the PA border. It is extremely dense out there, and if one were big enough, strong enough, and fast enough that could handle the weather, you could go from Jersey to PA to Ohio to Michigan without ever being seen by a soul. I drove to one of the parking lots of this extremely large forest, which took me about 1 hour and 10 minutes from my home. Being a cop at the time, I carried a Glock 23, 40 cal off-duty, 13 rounds in the mag, 1 in the spout, 2 extra mags, 40s in all. Sounds like a lot just to have as a backup, but it's Jersey, not Kansas. I hunted with a Remington 870 12 gauge. I got one of those. Shortened it myself. That's my saddle gun for bear stoppers. A 1.5 by 4.5 shotgun scope with 3-inch mag sabots. I had 2 in the sabos. Sabos? What are they? Sabos? Sabots? Whatever. Pick one. I had 2 in the tube and 1 chambered. Jersey law makes you use the tube block, so you can't put more than 2 in the tube while having 1 chambered. Yeah, they got the same thing here, but I took the plug out anyway. When it comes to self-defense, the charging grizzly bear, screw the government. I had a stretchable bandolier on the stock with 5 there, plus 5 more in my pocket, a total of 13 sabot slugs. I drove to the parking lot and chilled out for a couple of minutes before making any noise. Just to keep the area quiet. Guys, sometimes seeing deer just on the outskirts of the parking lot, that'd be perfect. Find a deer there and have him shot, gutted, and on my way in an hour. Great, but not this day. It was early, around 7:38 a.m., cool, but mild for December, low 40s. Sun's out and no breeze, beautiful day, but not exactly perfect for hunting. As I got my shotgun out of the case, I looked around and saw no one. Not one car in the parking lot, not a soul around. And the birds I did hear coming into the forest, I didn't hear again. Fully loaded up my shotgun, chambered around quietly, and then started to walk. I didn't go more than 20 feet, and I stopped, and every hair on my body stood at attention. I'm telling you, Steve, my hairs could have doubled for porcupine quills at that moment. I started scanning the area and saw nothing. Not a bird, a squirrel, chipmunk, nothing. But what I heard was palpable. All I heard was blood pumping in my ears like I was holding back Niagara Falls. It was eerie. At this point, I'm on full alert. I'm waiting for a few guys or a small army to jump out at me. Nada. Zip. And still not one single animal or bird around. I drove into the forest hearing woodpeckers, squirrels, a meadowlark. Now the air started getting heavy, and it felt just a wee bit harder to breathe. I'm strapped up with 53 rounds, and I'm not too sound. Gosh, but I don't miss. Might be a typo. I'll read that again. I'm strapped up with 53 rounds and not too sound. Gosh, but I don't miss. All right. For the first few years as a cop, when we go for qualifications, I'd make a sloppy face out of a target and give it to my qualifications officer. We'd be job buddies over the years, and he'd say, "Okay, wise ass, you qualify." To save me ammo, I say that because I was scared shitless and had no clue as to why. The ironic part about this story is the year before I came to this forest for the first time. A brutal northeaster fell on me and I got turned around. Had to go through the woods for quite a while until I heard vehicles. found a highway, and had my 12 gauge over my shoulder hitchhiking. A couple of hunters picked me up and drove me to my car. Thank you, Jesus. And Jesus is going to be a big part of this story later. So a year removed from me getting lost, snowed on, walking a couple hours at least, and as it was heading into dark, no problem, now I have over 50 rounds of ammo. Can't see or hear a bloody thing on a beautifully clear day, and I have, not intuition, some creature talking to me, my gut, or anything else that belongs to me, but the Holy Spirit saying, Charlie, you're not going hunting today, buddy. Sorry. Now I walk backwards 20 feet to my car, keep the shotgun in front of me. I unzip my jacket, unpop the strap of my Glock, open the door, put the shotgun still loaded, which I never do, into the passenger seat, remove my Glock, put it between my legs, turn on the car and drive away. But just as I was getting into the car, I heard a hoot, like it came from an owl. But this owl would have to have been about 10 feet tall to make that kind of a hoot. I didn't unload and recase my shotgun until I cleared the park, which in Jersey is illegal. At this point, I could have cared less about legality. Sorry this is long, but based on my previous year in the same place, and in basically a more dangerous situation, I wanted you to know why I walked away after driving an hour plus with all that ammo, when the year before I was almost snowed to death, but had absolutely zero fear and not afraid of the woods I was in. A very interesting dichotomy, wouldn't you say? Thanks for hearing this out. I've never told anyone. My wife said to me when I got home, "Did you catch anything? I wasn't expecting you this home early." I came up with some BS excuse she wouldn't understand, never having lived that kind of a life. We appreciate what you're doing, allowing others a voice. Love the scenery that you have. Be well and be wise. In the name of Jesus, the Messiah, the Holy One, Charlie. Charlie, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your sharing of that experience. Not only where, but all the details of it, and I'm quite certain somebody from that similar area will appreciate that share as well. And thank you for your service as being a police officer as well. Okay, know that you guys have got a lot more support out there than might be projected on mainstream media currently, which is a joke. I won't start ranting, but thank you again for that share and appreciate the kind words, sir. And on to another share. Steve, thank you for listening. I've told the story to only a few people. My great-grandfather, my older brother, and most recently my wife. Only my great-grandfather believed my words. I remember his eyes turning to mine and the look of concern that painted his face when the words, "big hairy man," came out of my mouth. That's the day I shot a rifle for the first time, a single-shot .22. My great-grandfather knew I was telling the truth. In the months following, I was out at the farm every weekend. And let me tell you, if a shot at a squirrel wasn't a headshot, then it was back to practicing in a school with a scolding. Great-grandpa was a hard man, and I still love him for the lessons he taught me. I remember old Joe, his farmhand too. Joe taught me what game not to shoot. Large game like bears, elk, or anything that walks like a man. Joe is a member of the First Nation. The encounter, my first of 5 over the last 43 years, happened when I was 7 years old. I'll get right to it. God, I hope I didn't read this, but I might have. I'm going to keep going anyway, you guys. Sorry. We had just moved into a house on the top of a bluff that overlooked the Missouri River Basin. Though we were in South Dakota, you could see Nebraska to the south over the vast floodplain, miles wide on a clear, dry day. No cities, no development, no pollution. Just miles and miles of untouched land. It's still largely that way today. I can still see in my mind's eye all the hues of gold, pinks, and purples that painted that landscape when the sun would rise and set. As the significantly youngest of 3 kids, entertaining myself was second nature. Having land to explore as far as the eye could see was a dream come true. Add to that a canvas pup tent, a whittling knife, and a freedom to wander and explore. There was nowhere else I wanted to be than out building forts, climbing trees, and watching the clouds pass over the shade of a willow tree. Until I learned that I wasn't alone on that bluff and never had been. I learned it right at that willow tree. You've heard 100 times about all-consuming sense of fear. Your world is about to be rocked to its core. You've experienced it yourself, the fibers of reality beginning to tingle and vibrate. Well, there was no fear, only tingling that moved right through me. As I sat up with a jolt, I'll never forget that feeling like electricity coursing through every cell in my body. When that thing decided to flip the switch, it wasn't fear. Only God knows how long it had been watching me or how many times before. Steve, as clearly as you are reading these words, I was clearly looking at a Bigfoot 25 yards away, and it was looking directly at me. There's no whooping, calling, or tree knocking, just a monster. A huge, hairy monster standing next to a tree looking right into my soul. Fear doesn't accurately describe what I was feeling. For what seemed like hours, we just looked at each other. I have zero recollection of how much time actually passed, but like it happened yesterday, I remember that big, hairy monster looking off over the bluff towards the south, his massive body turning itself in kind of a few seconds later, and then slowly walking sideways across the bluff eastward until it disappeared into the trees and brush. It never looked back. I suppose my trip back and up the bluff to home took 10 to 15 minutes. My big brother needed to know what had just happened, so I hopped on my Schwinn bike and rode into town to find him. Never did find him, but that evening back at home I was able to tell him. That asshole laughed and laughed. He called me a liar, told me I was loony, and dared to tell my mom and dad, which of course I never did. While watching another one of your videos last month, my wife interrupted to ask if I believed in Bigfoot. Looking her in the eye, I told her, it's not about believing or not believing. They do exist and they're everywhere. These creatures are real. Suffice it to say, she's not a believer, but as my father had said, a man can't equal anything more than the sum of his own experience. She can't know what I know, but we're not just husband and wife. We're also best friends. It's okay that she thinks differently. Sometimes I think she's crazy as a loon too. The only other person I told was to my great-grandfather. He did believe me. And my gut says that old Joe, the Native American that worked for him, believed the story too. His grandpa had to have told him. There's no doubt in my mind. But here's the thing, Steve. I never feared those woods. Many times since then I'd explore and while away the hours, days and years, we lived on that amazing piece of land. That electric feeling would come again many times. A couple of times while playing in the woods with friends. I stopped playing and headed directly home. Once taking a shortcut to a friend's house, he also lived in the bluff about a mile away. Once I was awakened by it on a late summer night, long sleepless night thereafter. Once while wade fishing in the 10,000 Islands of Flora, and again that night back at camp, but the sense of fear both those times was very real, and I felt it again hiking down a well-worn trail in the Blue Ridge Mountains. They're actually just big hills. Heading towards a waterfall I'd heard was quite a sight. The fear that accompanied that electricity, the time stopped me in my tracks and sent me back the way I'd come, head on a swivel, and the holster unsnapped the whole way. Old Joe's words about not shooting big game were ringing pretty loud in my head right then. He taught, or anything that walks like a man. These creatures are everywhere. Best regards and be safe out there. P.S. Please keep my name and email anonymous. All right. Thank you very much for that share. And I'll tell you what, I don't think, you mentioned the amount of people that just do not understand the fear, that flavor of fear that's involved with this shit, you know? You've had some very, very A-type combat veteran law enforcement officers who are basically not scared of anything. I mean, let's face it, you jump out of a helicopter into a foreign country getting shot at, and you jump in there and do your job, no problem. You're one kick-ass individual when it comes to keeping your shit together, not being, reacting accordingly. I guess I'm babbling a little bit, but what I'm getting at is the fear that these men and women describe, I've felt as well. I think it might be, I don't know if it's that easy, if they're getting the full flavor across through an email to all of you or not, I don't know. I'll tell you what, it's not something to envy or want to have to experience in this lifetime, that fear. Fear sucks, but I guess it keeps us alive, doesn't it? If we listen to it at the right time and react the right way. All right, what do we got? I believed in Bigfoot for a long time. I live in the Sierra Mountains outside of the Tahoe National Forest. Around 1999, one night a friend and I went higher in the mountains to look at the beautiful stars. Only a few cars there. We were there about an hour. Very quiet, with a slight sound of music playing from the drop-off in the canyon, which is below us. A roar came that was so loud it was hair-raising. The bass in the roar was so deep you could feel it in your skin. The vibration was like I've never felt before. Far more than a loud concert. Everyone in their chairs was standing up and no one was saying a word but looking around at each other. The fear was real. Another roar. Everyone ran to their cars and burned rubber out of there. It was all paved, so it made noises when we all drove off. We left our chairs and never went back for them. We never smelled anything, just two roars, and that was enough. I have no desire to see one. I don't need proof. I knew and believed even before that happened, just a feeling. I know. I've learned a great deal watching your show, which I've just stumbled upon. Thanks for sharing the stories. I can feel that it will come out and the truth will be known. Thanks again, Galian? Sorry, I can't pronounce. Thanks again. I feel that it will come out and the truth will be known. Thanks again. All right, thanks for that share. I wonder what the chances are some of those other people that were there that night are hearing this read right now are going to add to it. You never know. But thanks for that share. Hello, Stephen. This is Stephen Whitaker. Thank you for making this a safe place to air experiences without ridicule. We're west of Purgatory Road on the Devil's Backbone. This is Central Hill, Texas Hill Country. I have a couple stories. We'll try to be brief. Number one, September 2012, the weather was great. Clear skies, roughly 10 p.m. I was outside enjoying the stars. Here in the hill country, thankfully, we are shielded pretty good from the light pollution from San Antonio to the south and Austin to the north. Topography, hills, deep sharp valleys, heavily wooded with many springs, rivers, and lakes. Typical game, deer, occasional mountain lion, bobcat, ringtails, raccoons, coyotes, fox, wild hogs, and porcupines. As I stated, was out enjoying the night skies. I heard dogs barking out a ways, and they seemed to be coming closer. Dogs at a distance would stop barking, while dogs closer in would start up. Something was moving fast, past ranches and homes, on the way to a little valley behind my home. Dogs not responding to coyotes as normal. They were really going at it. Then the neighbor's dogs below us went nuts and then silenced. I was up and started around the house and back to see what my dogs were doing. I rounded the corner of the house with a southern breeze at my back. I see two lab/boxer mixes standing shoulder to shoulder on the porch, silent. These boys are 100-pound plus each and scared of nothing. As soon as they rounded the corner, they both went crazy. Bobtails between their legs, barking as I've never seen nor heard them. Hair straight up on their backs, side by side, refusing to leave the porch or me. I said to them, "Get 'em!" which would normally have them running down the hill into the night and woods in no fear. They stood firm, barking like crazy, then peeing on themselves, frantic. Right then, as I stood next to them, a roar/bellow/ungodly yell came out of the woods not 30 yards down the hill, just off the porch light shine. I vibrated my insides and I felt ill. I swear the windows vibrated. Everything went silent. Then I heard behind me and to the south of the house what I initially thought was a big hog and raccoons. I thought maybe whatever this thing was herding animals up the valley for a kill. After this noise, nothing but silence. Then up the valley, dogs going at it, then silent, and then further out, more dogs chiming in. I've heard some of the sounds these beings make on YouTube. The nearest I come to for the hogs and coons cavorting was the man that taped the beings in Northern California talking gibberish or samurai talk. Number two, my wife and I like to camp up near the Wichita Forest in East Oklahoma. We were at Lake Worcester and took the ride into the National Forest for the day. We went from paved road to forest road to four-wheeler paths. Come around a corner, entered a cleared area down on one of the valleys. You could tell someone had camped there in the past. Big fire ring, but appeared to be a long time ago. Walking around, we came up on tracks roughly 8 feet apart. The pine needles were deep here, but whatever it was ran on 2 feet. Toes dug into the dirt below the needles, and it ran straight up a very steep hillside. I took a picture. Lost at the moment, but I'll send it when I find it. My hat next to the track. The track was roughly 20 inches long, forward-leading toes and pad, as in running. The forest was silent, and we got the feeling we were being watched from above, up on the hillside, heavily forested. It was getting dark, so we left. Thank you again. I've told these stories to people I love and trust, and they won't believe until they ever go out or one comes up on them from behind their house. You can use my name or not. It's not what you did yesterday that counts most, it's what you plan to do today. Isn't that the truth? Stephen, thank you so much for that share, man. You know you're not alone. And it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter who believes or not. There's so much evidence that's just saturated now. It's just a matter of how or when we're going to get to the next step. I have a feeling it's coming sooner than later from some of the information I've been receiving lately, which will be shared later on, hopefully. But anyway, three generations of experience of Bigfoot in Ohio. Dear Steve, I want to thank you for your willingness to provide a platform for sharing of Bigfoot experiences. These life-changing events should be shared and told. Bless you for your courage and honesty. Too many people in today's world have lost their sight of what older generations knew. The government is never going to admit this to us, any more than they are going to be honest about UAPs, UFOs. Thanks for those kind words of support. I'm a 64-year-old woman who was born, raised, and lived most of my life in Ohio. I want to share my family's encounters with you. My parents and grandparents are deceased. I have up to now kept our experiences quiet, out of respect for them, and only spoken with my sons about them. While my grandparents and parents all believed in Bigfoot's presence, none wished to be ridiculed or thought to be crazy. I could care less, and you're welcome to use my name. It's Linda Bowers. I know what I've seen and experienced. I know what is real. I have loved the woods and the outdoors, but have not fooled myself as to what they may contain. Please forgive me for the length, but I want people to know Bigfoot is where you live. You don't have to go looking for them. You don't have to go to the mountains or remote areas. They are amongst us, doing quite well in rural Ohio. I grew up just 12 miles from Shawnee, where David Plottis got the story about the female hunter who saw a predator-type being which was see-through and shimmering. He included the incident in his movie Missing 411 The Hunted. He's been wonderful with the work he has done. Our national parks are hiding a secret that we should all know before we go into them. Our woods are filled with phenomena we don't comprehend. There have been many sightings of cryptids in Ohio, and in Allen County in particular. It is bountiful farmland in that part of Ohio and flat. You can see for miles across wheat, soybean, and corn fields. There are a lot of dairy and hog farms and farms that do hundreds of acres of grain farming. Large wooded areas dot the landscape, with many being virgin to this day. Deer everywhere, and coyotes are plentiful. The Ohio grassman, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the boogeyman, whatever name you prefer, is alive and well too. You might think, what would Bigfoot be doing there? He has a bounty of food available, and he's been there for hundreds of years thriving. The times have changed greatly since my grandpa was born in 1898. He spent much time in the woods hunting and trapping. He was a raw fur dealer in our area. For those who don't know what that is, he would purchase the fox, raccoons, muskrat, etc. that hunters shot or trapped. Then he would skin them, tan, and mount the pelts. Then he got to hear all the tales of hunters for miles around. He was truly skilled and experienced man in the art form and lifestyle that many have forgotten in today's society. I spent many nights watching him work and listened to his hunting tales as the ornate, coal-burning base burner warmed the fur shed. My grandpa's home, when I was growing up, was just across the road from the canal. Our village had been on an old canal town with 3 locks. Miami-Erie Canal was dug to get supplies through the Black Swamp area of Ohio up to Fort Toledo by creating a waterway from Cincinnati and the Ohio River. It was under construction from 1825 to 1845. The canal ran through the village of Spencerville, and the village was born as a supply stop. I do believe that one reason for Bigfoot had been so prolific in Ohio is the huge area that was originally swamp. My grandpa had some cattle, hotbeds, from which he sold vegetable plants in the spring to gardeners, a huge garden for his family, and fruit trees on his property in Spencerville. He also owned a homestead where he was raised, some 25 miles away. My home was 2 pasture fields to the west. We had a large garden, fruit, bushes, and some grain fields that another farmer rented. Our home was at the end of the residential street and within the city limits. The next farm over was a dairy farm with chickens and grain fields and large woods. In terms of food for Bigfoot, these 3 places provided a smorgasbord, along with the canal for seafood. My first recollection of Bigfoot was one spring when a couple of them trampled my grandpa's garden, and after the rain had left their prints everywhere. My grandpa was furious and asked my grandpa was furious and asked my dad to sit guard the next few nights with their guns in hopes of deterring further damage. I didn't realize exactly what had happened. My mom had said animals trampled the garden, and my granny had told me some people trampled it. Next, I had been out past dusk, playing hide and seek. I'd been running and not being able to see well. Had run into a guy wire. My eye had been swollen and bruised, which Granny had seen the next day. She asked what had happened. I said I'd been out past time to be in, hadn't seen it, and had run into the wire. She immediately was visibly shaken and shrieked, "What's the matter with you, child? Do you want the boogeyman to take you? Don't know better than to be out after dark? They take children all the time. You know better than that. Didn't your mother tell you to be in every night before dark?" I replied that she had, and then I asked what she thought the boogeyman might look like. Granny told me he was very tall, big, and strong, with long black hair all over him, and he stunk badly. Just then my mother came into the room and asked Granny not to scare me. Granny replied that I need to know the danger in being out after dark. Granny did not hesitate to tell me that boogeyman was a real threat. I was a light sleeper and was awakened at night regularly by a hooting owl. By an owl hooting. There was a huge dead tree in the fence row that ran up behind our barn. Usually I would get out of bed and see the owl perched in the tree, and I'd watch it. One night I heard the hooting, but the owl was nowhere to be seen. It was a bright night, and to my horror, a large black person stepped out of the grown-up fence row near the dead tree and walked towards our barn. I was frightened to death. The next day I told my mother what I'd seen. Within a few weeks, my dad had cleared the fence row and pulled the old fencing out. He also contracted the dead tree to be removed. My dad was the mayor of our town, and he would often hold open council meetings. One such meeting, the dairy farmer who lived near us came to the meeting and reported that 2 of his young cows had been taken. He said he'd followed the footprints to the perpetrator. All the council thought it highly unlikely that one person would walk out of the pasture, step over the fence, and walk off. Everyone concluded that the perpetrator had to have had at least 2 accomplices, whom the council agreed to look out for. My dad had assured the man that they would look into the incident, but told him his best bet would be to put in newer, higher fencing. When my dad relayed the meeting to my mom and me, he stated that he knew what had taken the man's calves. He also knew that no one would believe him if he told them. He said that my grandpa agreed with him that no man could carry 2 calves, one under each arm, and just step over the fence. There had to have been no other footprints found at the scene. Dad had gone to the neighbors to see the evidence. He surmised that no person in their right mind would go barefooted into a pasture and attempt to take calves without the mama cows going after them. He also felt that were it a man who'd taken the calves, that he would have had to set them down while he got over the fence, and they would run off. The tracks had just stepped over the fence, apparently while carrying the calves. My next incident was at my friend's farm. We decided to take a hike to the pond. We walked through the barnyard and by the paddock where the horses was dozing. She admonished her dog to stay, and we headed out. We took an old cow path, passed several fields, and got to an old cattle pasture, no longer in use. We had to hike through it to get to the pond. The grass was probably 2 to 3 feet high, and the trees were thick and hundreds of years old. It was a beautiful area, and the mature trees provided shade and cover. We started through, and for no reason I could identify, I felt dread. We were approximately halfway through the pasture when my friend told me to stop throwing stones at her. She said they hurt. I said I hadn't thrown anything. It seemed odd, but we weren't walking as close together at that point. I heard the same stones hitting near me, and then a stone came down just in front of me. I told her we need to get out of the pasture and run for home. My friend yelled out that we were leaving, and we were going to tell her father and brother. She yelled, "They'll come with the guns and the dog. You better leave right now." I don't know what it was she thought was throwing stones, but I know what I thought. We left as quickly as possible in the tall grass. Upon reaching the farm, we noticed the horse who had been dozing when we left was trotting around, snorting and shaking her head. She would stop, then dig at the earth with her hoof, and then throw her head up and down. The dog was acting very upset. He was barking and running around the barnyard. Next, a girlfriend and I were sleeping in our yard, which is over 3 acres, in a canvas tent. I believe that I was 12 or 13. It was midsummer. We'd been talking away when we'd heard something hit the metal trash cans that were kept by the barn. My friend was frightened and asked what had made the noise. I said, probably a raccoon. Then I began to smell a skunk smell and assumed it was a skunk. My girlfriend said she wanted to make a run for the house. She was frightened of the critters. I said, no, we don't want to get sprayed by a skunk. I no sooner said that and heard the lid being removed from one of the cans and dropped. I began to be fearful and said, skunks can't take the lids off cans. My friend said, shut up, it's not skunks. Whoever it is, they're using language. Who would be in our garbage talking? I replied that there are migrant workers now on some of the farms, but they were some distance away, and it didn't make sense for them to come and steal the fruit from the garbage. That's not Spanish. I know Spanish, my girlfriend had said. We listened intently, and the odor grew worse all the while. For lack of a better description, I can only say that it sounded as if the two of them were speaking samurai chatter. They were having a conversation while digging through the garbage, and I would soon be done. That much I knew. Once again, my friend wanted to run for the house. I told her no. They would see and hear us and perhaps catch us. I knew we couldn't outrun a Bigfoot, but I didn't tell her that I suspected that's what they were. I told her we needed to be absolutely quiet and pretend we were sleeping. Perhaps they would not bother us. They thought we didn't know they were there. I knew they would see the tent. However, since they had to walk right by the area we were in to get to the garden, I knew they would smell us when they stopped digging through the can. She wanted to know what they would do if I tried to get in the tent. Oh my God. Okay, listen, this is just... All right, this email is just too long. I'm gonna finish this with part 2 next time I'm out. All right, I got to get going. It's getting cold. It's past 7 now. I didn't bring a jacket, and I'm starving, and I'm starting to fade away after being sick for a couple days. So I will. Yeah, that's. This email is just too long, you guys. I gotta go. I don't have time for this. I just scrolled down to get to the bottom of it, and it's way too far down. So I'll resume this share next time I'm out, and keep sharing a bunch more. But I gotta go home. I'm not feeling too good yet, and I don't need to be. I need this little bug to get worse. But anyway, there you go. There's some more. Be safe out there. Once again, a link to support the channel is in the description below. Everybody is so appreciated. It's silly. And share my story howtohunt.com or tellmystoryhowtohunt.com to help out the people or get something off your chest. All right? See you soon.